Welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to have you here with us for our 7th session of Gallagher Talks today. This session's topic is all about construction projects. Our speakers will be discussing why the following 6 words, "we've always done it this way," are dangerous words, especially in our current times. I'm pleased to introduce to you our speakers this morning, Tyler Averill, our SVP of National Sales, coming to us live from London, Ontario, Chelsey Burke, AVP of Commercial Insurance, and Mike Hergott, SVP of Commercial Insurance, both coming to us from Ottawa. If you would like more information on Tyler, Chelsey, or Mike, feel free to click to the right of your screen and connect with either of them on LinkedIn. A couple of items before we get started. You will be receiving a recording of this webinar later this week. And because of the fast-paced nature of our talks today, any questions that you ask via the Q&A box will be addressed and responded to in several days from now. For anyone on the line having connectivity or sound issues, please reach out during the session using the Q&A box, and we will be here to reply to you and troubleshoot with you. We hope you enjoy today's topic. Remember, if you are on LinkedIn or Twitter, please share about your experience using hashtag Gallagher Talks. I also want to mention that we have other sessions taking place throughout the day today, covering areas such as fintech, energy, and captives. Just follow the link that pops up on your screen following this presentation to take you to the next one. Without further delay, I will now turn it over to Tyler, Mike, and Chelsey.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm really excited to have the 2 of our best construction, developer, and project placement experts here to discuss project placements and the trends surrounding these projects. Now, I know that trends have changed dramatically over the last 24 months, and maybe we can start off by just talking a little bit about project placements and why it might be dangerous to continue to rely on the way we've always done things in the past, and how maybe we should look at things a little bit differently as we move forward and look to place project insurance moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think it's best to open with a general statement to that point, Tyler. Gallagher has seen a number of areas in project insurance where outcomes have been less than desirable. This has been based on a few things like project structure, limits and levels of coverage, but now we're seeing this more so due to the current issues and pressures facing the hardening market. This has hit both the domestic and global market on a macro level. And things like capacity issues, underwriting restrictions, contract procurement methods, and the scope of work, take, for example, a mass timber project, is really highlighting the topic of today's discussion, which is why what we've always done can be dangerous. We're seeing the need to consider the priorities of the owner and the unique aspects of each project to refine the placement strategy, and especially on the larger project level.
Excellent. So, Mike, is it really just a shift in the current market conditions that's driving people to reconsider their process and placement decisions?
Well, I think any time that you see more dollar signs than you're expecting, it's going to cause people to kind of sit up and take notice and wonder what's going on. So I think it's definitely a catalyst. But what we're finding truly is that how the market has played out and is playing out, how it's changed so dramatically, and obviously the costs associated with that and some of the other frustrations that both clients and other organizations have faced, it's really underscoring 3 topics that we really need to focus in on here and understand a little bit better. And really that boils down to, who places the coverage and why, how do we come to that decision? What coverage are we actually placing? What are we purchasing? What limits and actual coverage frills are we looking for? And then third, who else has a stake or a seat at the table? What about other third parties that care about the coverage in place, whether that's lenders, whether that's governments, government funding, oversight, et cetera. So those 3 buckets are really being underscored now by the current market environment and causing us to have to look at things a little bit differently.
Okay. So maybe we can start off with that first bucket, who procures the coverage. We hear a lot about Osip versus CSEP. So maybe we can start off by talking a little bit about the differences and how we decide whether we should go forward with an Osip or CSEP solution, and which one's better, if either.
Yeah. Well, the OSIP and CSEP really differ based on that first letter of the acronym. So OSIP stands for an owner-controlled insurance program, whereas CSEP is a contractor-controlled insurance program. And the fundamental difference is really who provides that coverage. So based on the unique circumstances of a project, the partners, the stakeholders involved in that said project, one could be more suitable than the other. However, in other cases, we've actually seen organizations rely on their master property program, which sets the stage for a number of potential pitfalls in of itself.
Yeah, that is interesting. I know we've run across that a couple of times. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on some of the issues that come along with relying on the master property extension, because I know we've seen it from time to time, and I know that in the current property market, it could pose some problems for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say it's definitely claims and inadequacy of coverage to start. Using the master property program on, let's say, a larger renovation or retrofit, we could see the entire program be penalized for the construction losses, which we know tend to be more likely. Future renewals could be impacted on these policies, and what we consider to be operational and ultimately the claims affecting the loss ratios of the entire program. From an adequacy perspective or adequacy of coverage perspective, a good example would be a claim that causes a delay in completion of a project. Specific coverages are written into construction insurance policies, but not typically master property policies or portfolios, or the business interruption isn't worded for the construction exposures. So this is an area we'll be sure to integrate into our continued discussion on the coverage purchased and why some of the trends outside of just market capacity really are creating the need to reevaluate what coverage is actually purchased.
Excellent. So let's come back to the coverage discussion in a second, but what should we be mindful of when considering who procures the OSIP versus CSEP when looking at different options that are available?
Yeah, well, I'm going to sound like a lawyer here when I say it depends, but no other way. There's no sense sugarcoating it. Truly, we see very successful programs on either end of the spectrum, and what that really highlights or maybe brings to light right now is that over the last 10 years or so, with a softer market, there was a real push where whoever had more leverage, a larger pipeline, or had, just more premium dollars at risk or at the table, typically had enough to get things done and to push for terms. The softer market made things easier, and so that leverage was very important, and we would see that kind of be a determining factor as to whether it was a contractor or an owner that would place that coverage. I think what we've seen over the last few years anyways is that the stock in that argument is worth less. Yes, there's leverage. Yes, there's relationships that are at play. However, a number of owners and contractors have been caught off guard by changes in the market. And so that's really caused them to kind of question things a little bit as to, wait, are we doing this the right way? Or, hey, this isn't the result we're used to getting. What's going on? What gives? So when you're setting the stage to kind of understand where we should be going, if it should be a CSEP on one hand or an OSIP on the other hand, from my perspective, it really comes down to 4 key buckets or ideas that we should think about. So we need to understand where we sit as the purchasing party on what we like to call the control continuum. And whether that's, we need more control over risk, or we need more control over pricing, or maybe we don't. That's kind of topic one. From there, we need to understand, is there tailored coverage, or are there aspects of this project that are unique to us that perhaps our other party will not be able to address, or perhaps don't have the resources or wherewithal to kind of navigate that. Maybe my needs as the owner trump some of the contractor's perspective. And then from there, a third bucket being the actual resources and knowledge base within our organization. Do we have enough, ponies in the barn, so to speak, to be able to spend time and dive into some of these issues? Do we have the ability to dedicate people to some of the nuances within this coverage and interacting with our broker partner, our insurers, and the contractor? we see sometimes just owners don't have that resource in-house and they're relying on the contractor. And so that can be a trump card for them that maybe pushes them in a different direction than another owner may proceed with. So those are the three so far. And the fourth being, from my perspective, is really claims adequacy or claims advocacy in general, which is, hey, how much of a seat do I want at the table when we have a claim? What's going to happen there for me? What are what's really important to this project's success for me? What does that impact my organization? What perspective am I carrying there? And so that claims perspective can be, a really interesting fourth category when we start to discuss, okay, should we be Osip, should we CSEP? And as you can imagine, those four could all have kind of push and pull depending on uniqueness of the people at hand, the stakeholders, and the project details itself. Yeah.
It sounds like there's several factors in determining whether we go OSIP or CSEP, the profile of the project, the owner's needs, other factors that may determine whether or not we make a decision one way or another. I know that we hear a lot about OSIP versus CSEP, increasing competition, and does the increased competition really set the stage for the best outcome? Is more competition in this kind of setting where we're looking at placing OSIP versus CSEP, is that better?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly society has proven that more competition typically leads to innovation, whether that's in product offering, breadth of coverage, or breadth of services, or price concessions. So it does sound pretty counterintuitive to think that, hey, wait a second, why wouldn't I want both my owner and my contractor out there trying to procure coverage for me? Let's see which one will win out. And unfortunately, that kind of ad hoc method in today's marketplace isn't the ideal outcome. It's not going to get you the best strategy or the best bang for your buck, so to speak. The reason being is that the market has changed so much that pricing can only go so far. Right now, we're trying to navigate a number of other areas, which is, who are we going to get to be a strong lead market and who's going to subscribe to that? Those weren't questions that we were struggling with over the last 5 years, or not to the same degree anyways. And so if we take missteps out of the gate and we approach the market in a way without kind of thinking about what we're striving for and really thinking about some of those characteristics I talked about previously, we're going to be setting the stage for something that's just less than optimal. And that's frustration, that's inefficiencies, that's, premium dollars spent that didn't need to be, can manifest itself in a number of different ways.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know it is something important to keep in mind when entering into these projects, to be very thoughtful about, who is going to go to market. So those are all great points, Mike. What else should be on people's minds when thinking about generating the best terms if it's not just creating that competitive scenario to get the best terms?
Yeah, so I would say that the quality of the submission is a huge aspect of that. So taking the approach of sending in numbers and applications to an underwriter like we've seen in some scenarios is really not enough. You really have to delve deeper into the submissions to the markets and tell more of a story, a project story, the story of the developer or the GC. The strategy for engaging the appropriate markets is also paramount. We've seen the marketplace shrink, obviously, quite significantly and become a much more connected segment. And also how domestic and global capacity is utilized in a project structure is also important. So if you don't have an approach to procuring the coverage with a compelling narrative, with comprehensive underwriting detail, and a plan for approaching the markets that are most likely to play a lead, play a subscribing role or an excess role, then the results tend to be less than ideal.
Yeah. So, we always know that construction risks are continually evolving. Can you talk about the trends you're seeing that come up with regards to tailoring coverage to maybe proactively address any potentially unforeseen risk exposures that may be coming up?
I think that really opens up the second point that Mike mentioned, which is the coverage that's actually being purchased. We're definitely seeing a wide range of entrepreneurial spirit in the decisions we see behind the structure and coverage placed. However, most importantly, we're seeing an overriding trend across Canada, and particularly in the construction industry, of more litigation, which is a cause for concern.
Okay, so is that now requiring us to do a push for more limits, or is there additional coverage that we should be considering due to the increasing litigation? And is additional limit even possible considering all the market conditions you guys just mentioned?
Yeah, well, Tyler, frankly, it's both. It's a push for a review in both of those directions. And quickly to the last part of your question about, are increased limits possible? With the right process and with right strategy, things are possible. So parking that and focusing more so on, severity and the trends that, Chelsey mentioned about the litigious nature of the construction environment, we are seeing a push for, a significant review of limits, considering really a debate being set in front of us as a result, which, kind of, if I put myself in a developer's situation or perspective for a moment here, I've got this balancing act between, okay, premium dollars that I'm going to spend up front, and then my tail exposure, what could come after the fact, and where the breadth of coverage really gets measured, or what comes, or is what's waiting for me after my project is complete, and whether I'm retaining that myself, going to be selling it off to a pension co, or whatever else. All of those things can kind of shift. And what I think we're seeing still, Chelsey mentioned something about the entrepreneurial spirit behind these decisions. We're still seeing polarizing views on what limits and what coverage is sufficient. So I think that lends to kind of the theme of today, which is we've always done it this way. Well, we need to start thinking about if what we've always done is keeping up with the trends, whether that's from, how litigious things have become in our society and the construction environment, the severity of water damage losses and the density of buildings. If we think about a typical high-rise project, just all of that is coming home to roost. And so really when it comes to the coverage that we're purchasing, we do have to start thinking about the sufficiency of it. And we do have to be engaging in different conversations, because what worked for us in the past isn't necessarily a mirror image or going to be what the recipe calls for today in our current environment.
Yeah. I know you mentioned tail exposures, and I know that we've seen from time to time owners of projects get kind of caught up in the tail exposures and maybe not properly having the right insurance in place, or having the right insurance in place, but maybe not having a difficulty through the claims process. And I know a lot of that kind of boils down to, addressing those concerns because of even reputational desire to maintain a strong reputation in the market. But maybe you guys can address a little bit of the tail exposures and how we can be maybe a bit more proactive and address that at the onset of a project by following a proper process.
Yeah, we need to be thinking about that, Tyler, about the bigger picture, like you mentioned, from the onset, and consider the issues that come up years after a project, and not obviously just during construction. On a high level, and as an example, we know that water damage claims are riddling the market. So maybe we could look at placing a pollution policy at the onset of a project, which could help address potential resultant mold issues that could arise years later or relate to that specific construction claim. So again, we need to be thinking about the stakeholders in the project and the overall return on investment from the onset, and what coverages are available to mitigate that risk or potential loss.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of innovation on coverage, and then at the same time, some restriction from coverage from carriers as well, as we begin to place these projects with different carriers. I know that's also led to the client's ability to satisfy third-party requirements. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about the ability to meet those third-party requirements.
Yeah, well, certainly we've all had conversations where, whether antiquated or not, someone's talking about a rule of thumb and is referencing why they're looking for a particular evidence of coverage, or saying that it should be a certain percentage of X or Y. And in the past, I can understand where there was a tendency and a true feeling of comfort in some of those rules of thumb because the marketplace was more reliable. It was more consistent. There was a lot more uniformity to what was being achieved and placed and provided by the carriers. And really what's happening now is, that doesn't necessarily hold the same weight. And we're seeing nuances in the policy triggers, in the actual operative clauses of the policies, in some of the really meat and potatoes aspects that we have to be more aware of. And so, yes, there's been innovation in the space. Yes, we're seeing some capacity issues. Yes, we have, sometimes some rules of thumb where we're literally just taking what a cost consultant report says and looking to see that evidence on policies. But that isn't necessarily the right outcome. And there's a lot of different things that we need to consider for an owner as a result of that. So the short answer to that, Tyler, is it's a mixed bag, and we have to be engaging in those conversations a little bit differently as a result.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly there's a lot to process when determining OSIP versus CSEP and placing big project schedules or small project schedules. Like I think we've talked about, it's, who procures the coverage, which coverage you're purchasing, even, get down to what is the exact process you're going to take to market, which is what Chelsey was talking about, and ensuring you're presenting the risk in the right manner, using the right markets and understanding the global capacity. And then lastly, making sure that that right capacity you're lining up satisfies the third-party coverage requirements. So there certainly is a lot to take in. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about one key takeaway everybody should walk away from this session thinking about in order to make sure that the next time they have a large project or the next time they have go to think about their overall program, what should they consider in the new world that we're working in?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to have an appreciation of the market reach, market understanding of who you choose to work with. Construction risk and navigating the market is very complex, and the need to understand the space, keep up to date with the market trends, litigation, and available coverage is truly how to better risk manage and ultimately protect your investment in the end.
Yeah, I think building off of that, I think that sets the stage nicely, which is, we can't keep doing the same things and expecting different outcomes. And certainly when things have changed the way that they have so dramatically over the last, 24 to 36 months, if we want a better outcome, we have to think about a better process. And keeping in mind that process doesn't necessarily come to the same decision tree or decision each time, because we might have some unique aspects of a project. We might have, a developer building an Amazon warehouse that, a $200 million project is going to be done in 12 months versus someone doing a high-rise condo that might take 4 years to complete. We have to make sure that our process is malleable but adaptable to what we're seeing, not only from the project specific side and the nuances and the characteristics of the project, but also from the actual overall risk and global space, which is what Chelsey's talking about in terms of resources and reach. So I think for me, if I was to conclude, it would be, if we want a better outcome, if we don't like what we're seeing, it might be time to think about what the process is behind the wheel, or behind the wheels, and how we're getting there. Yeah,
you raise a good point, Mike. Just a few other things that I'll add to that. One of the things that leads into process is a detailed planning of what the overall marketing looks like, and understanding what the global capacity looks like as well. We know that we've seen, if you enter into a marketing of a large project or program, that you can quickly receive declines if it's not presented in the right way. And as soon as those declines hit the books, it's really hard to reverse that decision and kind of unwind what's happened. And or if you reach out to the wrong partner, you might end up getting lesser terms because you're not necessarily looking at the global capacity that's available in the marketplace and leveraging that to the best of your ability. So I think it really is important to make sure that, the broker that you work with understands the global capacity and the global marketplace for that particular risk, whether it be a mass timber job or a large valued non-combustible job. they understand the nuances and differences and the right carriers that they should be leveraging to get the capacity. And then when they go to market the solution, they should be understanding the right program and program structure that they need to be marketing in order to get the best results and to get them the highest amount of interest involved. Any one of those missteps could cause a lack of capacity, and then at the end cause increased premium or decreased coverage, right? So,
I think it's always harder to get someone to change their mind after they've said no and turn it into a yes. Where it's really easy to say no after you've said yes, you've changed your mind, but it's just very difficult in today's marketplace to overturn some of those missteps. And if you make those coming out of the gate, you're in for a tough road with a bunch of bumps and some hurdles and usually some inefficiencies and some frustrations to go along with it.
Yeah. Sure. Maybe you guys can wrap up, Mike or Chelsey. We have about 5 minutes, but I know that one of the things that's helped us continue to innovate, continue to develop, but also to stay at the front edge of what's happening in the marketplace is consistently doing a benchmarking exercise of our total book and working with the entire construction practice across Canada in a collaborative manner to understand how quickly the ball is moving and making sure we stay ahead of that curve versus behind the curve. I think that's been really important in the past in making sure we adapt with the markets as opposed to trying to keep up with them and misstepping and causing ourselves or our clients pain. And, the reverse has been true where we've seen situations where brokers have not been able to keep up with the market, or we've seen situations where clients have not been able to keep up with the market, and we get a project that couldn't be placed with very small window of time available and a very few amount of carriers, and we're trying to unwind all that, right? So
and that's a good point, Tyler. I think what's kind of unique, and when you mentioned the benchmarking, is our access to resources. With so much focus in Gallagher and, such a brain trust made up of construction experts with a ton of experience and a ton of knowledge, and again, quite a few projects to be able to compare to or contractors to be able to use to benchmark, it really gives us an edge to ensure competitiveness within the market and really make sure that our clients are getting the best offerings that are out there.
Yeah, and to add to that, the world and the marketplace has become global. And so it's not just enough to be analyzing and thinking about those trends across Canada, but also to make sure that we're developing and you're getting as an owner or someone procuring insurance, that you're getting the perspective of what else is happening, because we can't have our blinders on anymore. We need to be able to access the global market. We need to understand where that sits, where that plays, and to keep things as sharp as possible, we need to be plugged in to not only what's happening here domestically at home, but how these supporting cast and carriers worldwide can play a role in our success of placing that project and protecting that pro forma or that ROI or whatever measure you're thinking about when that project comes to fruition.
Yeah. Well, I think that that pretty much puts a wrap on our talk today. Mike and Chelsey, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to share your knowledge and wisdom with everybody on the webinar today, and really appreciate everybody taking the time to join this session. So thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Tyler.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.